Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. Looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 591. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about mountain gorillas and chimpanzees, volcanoes and lakes and rainforests and the Big Five, and yes, genocide as we go to Rwanda. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Not a lot of news today, so let's just get right in and start talking about Rwanda. I'd like to welcome the show VJ from the Voyager blog at imvoyager.com, who's come to talk to us about Rwanda. VJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure being with you.
So why Rwanda? What brought you to Rwanda?
To be honest, before I landed in Rwanda, I knew very little about Rwanda. In fact, when you think Africa, you normally think South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, but not Rwanda. But I landed up there about 6 months back, and what I saw blew my mind off. And why people should go to Rwanda? If you want to go to a place where nature is still pristine, there are incredible landscapes which vary from rainforests, grasslands, tea plantations, volcanic mountains, and lakes. Then you need to get to Rwanda. Add to that the wildlife, which is synonymous with Africa. You find that in a very pristine environment. And of course, the mountain gorillas of Rwanda are the prime attraction.
Well, and I should say that when VJ pitched me this show, we had done a show talking about going to see the mountain gorillas in Rwanda and Uganda. But I think it is getting upon 9 or 10 years old by this point, and so it was a fairly easy pitch to revisit this beautiful African country. So I do have to ask, I know you're a travel blogger, but do you usually go to places that you don't know anything about?
Sometimes, yes, but not always.
Okay. Well, and then we talked about why we should go there. What kind of itinerary would you recommend for people?
First of all, I would say you need at least a minimum of 1 week
Okay.
if you really want to enjoy what Rwanda has to offer. The more days you spend there, the better. And 1 week itinerary, I would say you would start with Kigali, which is a capital city.
Mm-hmm.
You start with visiting the genocide memorial there,
Okay.
which is a memorial for the victims of the civil war that occurred some years back.
Mm-hmm.
And this sets the right perspective for you to visit Rwanda. So you start with Kigali, and then I would advise the Volcanoes National Park, which would be the prime attraction, and you get to meet the gorillas on a gorilla safari. A couple of days there because there are more activities there than just the gorillas. Then a couple of days in Nyungwe rainforest, and there a couple of things are a must when you are there. One is a walk to a hanging bridge which hangs in midair across the rainforest. Apart from that, there are quite a number of trails that you can do, nature trails, bird watching, all that you can do that. That would account for 5 days. 2 days, 1 day I would keep for a cruise on the Lake Kivu, which is quite an ethereal experience, and one day would be transiting between the places.
And now let's go back and do that a little more slowly. So you started us in Kigali, in the capital city, and you mentioned already that you wanted us to go to the memorial to the genocide that happened there 20 years ago now? Over 20 years ago, according to
over 20.
Wikipedia, 1994. Wow, okay. It doesn't seem like it's been that long ago since this happened. And what else would you recommend we do while we're in Kigali?
The genocide memorial is the one thing, and a quick tour of the city to get an idea of the local life. But I wouldn't waste much time in Kigali because I would head out into the forest. I mean, that is for what Rwanda is known for, and that is why I and most people head out to. So I would use Kigali as a base camp only.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm going to guess, because we're talking about a sub-Saharan African capital, that it is relatively colorful and chaotic and quite populous.
Yeah, that is one of the surprises which I found. The first surprise that I found when I landed in Rwanda was we were checked not for contraband but for plastic. So I would just like to tell everyone that plastic is totally banned in Rwanda.
Plastic bags and things that are going to be thrown away.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're completely banned. When we stepped out of the airport, it all fit into place because there was not even a speck of dust or garbage on the roads. It's so spick and span. And that was a great surprise. And looking at the city, your concept or whatever you have conceived about Africa goes for a toss. So it's a revelation of a kind. So it's not like your typical chaotic African city. It's more like a modern metropolis, and without the traffic, without huge crowds.
So it's not so much that you disliked Kigali that you're not recommending spending so much time there. It's that you like even more so the reason that you go to Rwanda, which is for the wildlife, for the scenery. Okay, got it.
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned going to see the gorillas, and one thing we should give some people an idea of how easy it is to get a ticket or what do you need to be able to get to see the gorillas when you go to Volcanoes National Park?
The Volcanoes National Park is a place where you get to see these gorillas. You have to buy these passes,
which are limited in number.
Yeah, they are limited. So on an average, just around 80 passes are issued in a day.
Okay.
This is to restrict the footfall, ensure that the environment is sustained and the gorillas still have the natural environment. So that is the reason. One is you can book directly from the Rwanda Tourism Board's site.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. Or you can also go to Volcanoes National Park Reception Center. But my advice is you need to reach there early because the trekking starts quite early. By 7, you have to be there because the trek starts around 7:30. The reason being it's easier to catch the gorillas before they have their breakfast.
Okay.
Because once they do that, there are chances that they go much more deeper into the jungle. And so it's a little difficult and more of trekking.
Did you not have a permit ahead of time? Did you actually just show up that day and count on getting in?
No, we already had a permit.
Okay.
Because we had gone through Rwanda tourism themselves. So they had actually arranged the ticket. So we had that and we reached there around 7. So we were all set.
And how far in advance did that get set up?
This was set up just about 2 weeks prior to our trip to Rwanda.
Okay. Because my understanding is when you're not with the tourism board, you want to do it even further ahead than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Months ahead of time.
Yes.
Okay. And then normally I think that pass is something like $500 nowadays?
After I visited, the price has doubled.
Okay.
It was $750 at that time.
Oh, okay.
Now it's doubled to $1,500.
Okay.
And in fact, there was quite a lot of discussion on that, but they've done it to support sustainable tourism. They don't want too many footfalls. And that is apparently the reason that has gone up. There's been a steep increase in the price.
Well, and you mentioned steep. That is the other thing I hear that is used to describe not just the price, but the hike.
That's right. The hike is steep in portions, not the entire thing,
Mm-hmm.
because you start off the hike across plain farms,
Mm-hmm.
and then once you enter the forest, then it gets a little more difficult, and there is some parts which are steep, which are almost vertical, but not too much.
Okay.
If you have an issue with your footing or something,
Mm-hmm.
there are guides available. Then they are called as porters, so they can carry your backpack, and they will also help you climb those tricky parts.
Mm-hmm.
So that is not an issue. And more than the steep one, once you get into the thick jungle, because there's no trail there, so you have these rangers with you
Mm-hmm.
who actually cut their way through the jungle, thick jungle with a meche, and then you enter the forest. So, and actually, in some portions, you have a swampy soil where your feet is likely to actually get stuck and you start sinking a bit.
So we're doing all this so that we can get to the gorillas. I'm assuming you did not change your mind on the way there and decide this was way too much work. So tell us about the actual encounter with the gorillas.
Whatever we did and the hardship, if I may call it that, personally, I didn't find it a hardship. It was more of an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
All that wanes into the background when you come face to face with the gorillas. To recount my personal experience, we first heard them
Mm-hmm.
before we actually saw them. So we heard the sounds of the gorillas because it's all very thick forest. So you're covered by these creepers and vines and things like that. So we were right upon them. So we entered a small clearing and they were there. They were just in front of us, actually almost like handshaking distance. And it
Oh
was an
my.
incredible. The one thing which I will never forget in my life is as soon as we reached there, I saw one of the gorillas. And as a travel blogger, the first thing that I would do is go for my camera. So I focused my camera on him. And at that moment, something brushed past me, and I saw another gorilla walking by, brushing past me into the bushes. So that was a defining moment in my travels.
Excellent. Anything else you want to share about the gorillas? Otherwise, let's talk more about other things that you can do when you're in volcanoes.
Once you reach these gorillas, there are about 10 families of these gorillas at
Mm-hmm.
different locations. So each group, a group would be of about 8 people. So each group visits just one gorilla family.
Right.
Okay, so that ensures that one gorilla family has just one group of visitors in a day. We visited this family, and it was amazing to see because there was a small baby also in this family, and the mother was suckling the small baby gorilla and in her lap. It was almost human. The motherly instinct that she
Mm-hmm.
displayed and the love that she was showing, it was absolutely like a human. In fact, gorillas are 98% humans.
By chromosomes, you're saying.
That's right.
By genes, huh?
They look huge,
Mm-hmm.
they look menacing, but if you look into their eyes, they are very gentle. Probably, I think they are less dangerous than man.
Okay.
Okay, so that's about the gorillas, probably.
And then did you do other things in Volcanoes National Park?
Unfortunately, no, because we had a packed itinerary.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the gorillas, there are quite a number of activities that can be done there. One activity which I regret and probably I would go back to do that is visit the Dan Fossey tomb is there.
Okay.
There's a trek which takes you there, and which is something that you can do. And there are also some other treks to the volcanic mountains,
Mm-hmm.
which are pretty interesting. So there are 3 or 4 activities which can be done there. You can do one of these in a day. So if you need to do 2 or 3, you need to spend at least 2-3 days there itself. So you need to go in for more days. So if you are looking at a 1 week itinerary, I think primarily you should focus on the gorilla trekking.
Okay. And it sounds to me like you were there with the tourism board on a press trip, and those are always rushed. You always do twice as much in half the time than you would ever recommend for other people to do. Sure. Okay. Excellent. And then you went from there to Numwe Rainforest. Do I have that correctly?
Yeah, there's a Nyungwe Rainforest or Nyungwe National Park. That's a beautiful, one of the montane forests. I think one of the biggest montane forest in Central Africa, and it stretches to about 1,000 square kilometers. This place is absolute, in the lap of nature, so the forest and this Amazonian kind of feel there. And the first thing that we did was hike to what is called as a canopy walk. It's a hanging bridge.
Okay.
There was a hike which took us there. It's not a long hike, just about took us 1.5 hours of walking. But again, there is a slightly steep descent, and it can be tricky if it's rain because it can be a bit slippery.
You say if it's raining and you're in a rainforest, so that seems like that is a pretty good chance there. Okay.
So when we went there, it was raining. I mean, there will be some sort of bit of rain, but not too heavily. So it was fine. So we reached this bridge, and then you can walk across the bridge. It is quite an experience because when we reached there, it was almost like sunset, looking out over down below into the valleys and the forest. It was an ethereal experience. Also looking at the sunset from the middle of the forest high above. It was a wonderful experience and also a great adventure because walking across that bridge, though it looks easy, was not that easy because there were people with us who actually weren't able to do it or too scared to walk because
Sure.
the
Yeah.
bridge keeps hanging.
And we say hanging up in the canopy or hanging above a gorge, or where are we hanging above here?
It is hung above the forest, so at a height. So you have to first climb down, and there's a valley there,
Mm-hmm.
and at the bottom you have the actual forest. And when you climb down halfway through, hangs this canopy walk, this bridge.
Got it. Okay. So you're up in the tops of the trees. So
Yeah,
are you with a guide at this point and they're pointing out the birds and things that live in the canopy of the rainforest?
there always will be a guide whether you go hiking in the Volcanoes National Park or in the Nungwe National Park. There will be a guide with you who will show you the things that you need to see. And in case of Volcanoes National Park, you also have armed guards just in case who are armed with AK-47 rifles.
Okay. Not, I suspect, to protect us necessarily from the wildlife as much
No.
as from poachers, or
Yeah, and more probably to actually protect the wildlife. That is what I guess, because in the past things are very much better now. There's been a lot of poaching, etc. there, and so it's basically for that. But over last 5 years, there has been a dramatic drop in that, owing much to the measures that's taken by the government, I guess.
Okay, got it. Well, and as I recall, wasn't Diane Fossey killed by poachers?
Yeah, that's right. And there's an unsolved mystery and one of the enigmas of that region. So she was found dead, and probably the poachers are suspected.
Okay.
Yeah, those days it was very bad, but things they have changed drastically now. All for the good work and for the cause that she was martyred. Things are 100 times better today.
Okay, got it. Anything else we want to do in Numwe?
There are many things which you can do in Nyungwe. As I said, we did this, and the other thing we did the next day was go on a chimpanzee trail.
Okay.
Okay, again, it's a 2.5 walk inside the jungles. So one of the attractions of the Nyungwe National Park is it is home to probably more than 100 different species of primates.
Oh, wow.
So around 500 chimpanzees made their home in this forest, which is called the Chamdongo Forest. I'm not very sure about the whether I'm pronouncing it correctly.
I will not correct you.
Okay, this is where you can get to see the chimpanzees and their life. The only difference between the chimpanzees and the gorillas was that gorillas were on the ground in front of us, but chimpanzees normally don't come. They are high up in the trees, so you can see them. You'd get a neck pain seeing them, and probably to get a closer view would need to use some binoculars, which I borrowed from one of the rangers, and I had a good view. So that is another trek which we did while we were there in Nyungwe National Park. Apart from that, as I said, there are quite a numerous trails one can do, like if you have time and if you want to say, you could actually camp in Nyungwe National Forest for maybe a week and do all these trails, because there are trails for bird watching.
Okay.
There are many huge species of birds, different varieties of birds, and for birders, for very passionate birders, it would be a haven. They can do that. And there's also something called the source of the Nile walk, because it is believed that the source of the White Nile
Hmm.
lies in Rwanda. There are different versions to that, and different countries claim that the source lies there. But it is believed that the White Nile, and specifically the White Nile, is there in Rwanda, the source, and it's about 3 to 4 hours from Nyungwe National Park. One can drive there, and there's a trek which is about 4 hours, which takes you to the source of the Nile. So this is something very interesting. Probably I bookmarked that for my next trip whenever that happens to Rwanda.
Okay. Excellent. And then you also mentioned a cruise on a lake was the last thing that you had on your itinerary.
This is a lake which is called Lake Q. We did about a 3 hour cruise. We actually reached the Volcanoes National Park via boat. This is not something generally people would do, but we wanted to experience the lake and a cruise on that. So we went for a cruise and reached the national park, or the hotel that we stayed there during the cruise. So the lake is called a limnic lake. I mean, it is prone to limnic eruptions, and from a little I know or I've read about geology, what it means is there are volcanic craters beneath the lake
Okay.
which can erupt at any time, but it hasn't. And the lake is a very placid lake and wonderful panoramas. So we had a good, it was a small houseboat kind of a cruise with an upper deck where you can have amazing views of the lake. So that's what we did, and we enjoyed it a lot.
Now, this lake is the lake, excuse me if I get this wrong, this is on the western border of Rwanda?
Yes, you can actually, while you are cruising on the lake, in the far distance, I think we can see the borders of the Congo.
The Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, and we didn't say, we're doing a smaller itinerary in Rwanda. We didn't say that Rwanda is, what, less than 100 miles across. So we're not talking about a very big country. So you saw not all the country, certainly, but a decent amount of it in just about a week.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Because if I look at the map, we ended up circumnavigating the country almost. It's not a big country, quite a small country, landlocked,
Mm-hmm.
with the borders of Congo and Burundi and Tanzania. So that's quite a small country, so you can get around pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you say pretty quickly. I'm assuming that while it may look fast on my map, that some of those roads are going to take a little longer than they would for the same distance here.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Because the roads uh, are like, it's a hilly region in most of the
Mhm.
cases, and so it'll take a little longer. But for example, if it is say 100 kilometers, we would do it in say about 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I remember is we've never driven more than say 4 hours at a stretch.
Okay. Now, had you been to other sub-Saharan African countries before Rwanda?
No, actually, this was my introduction to Africa,
Okay.
and so I had all these preconceived notions of Africa, which were blown
And
off
how did
by
it
my.
do compared to your preconceived notions? You mentioned getting off and seeing it was a cleaner city back in Kigali. What else surprised you about Africa?
Of course, the usual things of Africa, that is the wildlife. Apart from that, what I really loved was the kind of sustainable tourism that is being
Mm-hmm.
practiced in Rwanda.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I would like to mention here is they have this unique event which takes place every fourth Saturday of the month,
Mm-hmm.
and wherein it's the entire community will take up work for the community, which includes cleaning the country. So everyone works towards ensuring that Rwanda is a neat and clean country.
Hmm. Interesting. Wow, there's a lot of countries that could use that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Many of the countries could take a leaf from that country.
Right. Interesting. What else surprised you about Rwanda?
The people, of course, as I said, I have not been to any African country.
Mm-hmm.
So the kind of warmth of the people was something, which again blew me off. And I was really surprised by their friendliness.
Mm-hmm. Well, my impression, I haven't been to Rwanda, but I've been to nearby Tanzania, and my impression was you go to see the wildlife and you go back to see the people.
Uh-huh.
Anything else we should know about Rwanda before we get to my last 4 questions?
Oh, yes. I think we missed one of the places, which is the Akagera National Park.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So Akagera National Park is national park where now we have the big five. Okay, recently that is just before I was there, they introduced rhinos there. So we have the big five there, and you can go on a safari.
So this is more grasslands, and you're at the far opposite, way at the opposite end of the country. So 100 miles away on the Tanzanian border.
Yes, so absolutely. So it is a contrasting landscape to what we had say to Nyungwe a national park, or even to the Volcanoes National Park. So it's a huge grasslands, and you can see the animals. So
okay, and you say the big five, and the big five, I think we've talked about it on the show before, but people may be surprised by what the big five are. So we should list them. I'm going to let you do it.
just to correct myself and maybe put it in right perspective, people say that it's not just the big five, it's the big six.
Okay.
Because you have to include the gorillas.
Okay.
So you have lions, then you have rhinos, and you have leopards, you have elephants. So how many did that make?
You made 4, and I think you just left out water buffalo was the surprising one.
And those are the maximum that you get to see normally.
Yeah.
So Akagera National Park is about a jungle safari, and then there's also another lake which borders the Akagera National Park. Lake is called Lake Ihema, and we went on in a boat, power boat, which took us a little into the lake, where you actually get to see these crocodiles and hippopotamus.
Okay.
There's a small island, uninhabited island, where you see many exotic birds there. And so again, that was a good experience that we had. Just probably half an hour that we spent in the lake.
Now, I'm going to guess they didn't get you as close to the crocodiles and the hippos as they got you to the gorillas.
Absolutely. Probably. Otherwise, we would not be doing the podcast, I guess.
Good. Fair enough. Good point. Excellent. Anything else we should know before we get to our last 4 questions?
I think we are done as of now.
Okay. The most beautiful spot of all the places you were in Rwanda. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
When I was on the canopy, Nyungwe National Park, on the canopy walk, and the sun was setting and the clouds were just flitting across on the horizon, and we could actually almost touch the clouds. So that moment was magical. And if you look down, you could see the green of the forest and evening. So a lot of chirping of birds. So it was absolutely paradise-like kind of an atmosphere that time.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Rwanda.
The only thing that I remember which made me laugh was again to do with the gorillas, because I had mentioned earlier there was a small baby, and it also had a brother which was an adolescent gorilla, and it was exhibiting a sibling rivalry. So it was trying to disturb his mother and trying to push her when he was playing with the smaller kid. So that did bring a smile to our lips.
Excellent. And last question, finish this thought. If you had to summarize Rwanda in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Dream come true.
Excellent. Nice job. Okay. And our guest again is VJ from the Voyager blog, or IamAVoyager.com. And VJ, if we wanted to send people to your best article on Rwanda, what's the article we're going to send them to?
So I have actually 4 to 5 articles, but probably because Rwanda is synonymous with the gorillas, with the mountain gorillas. I would want them to get a idea of the kind of experience that I personally had. They need to visit this post, which is titled "On the Trail of the Gorillas in Volcanoes National Park, Rwanda."
Excellent. Vijay, thank you so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your newfound love for Rwanda.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure. It's been my pleasure all along. Thanks for having me on the show.
In news of the community, I understand that the first block of rooms that we booked for the trip to Prague, Krakow, and Budapest has actually sold out. So we're going to open up some other rooms here. Just remember that if you're putting off doing this, the largest group we've ever had is about 11 people. We will close it off at 16. We have a couple singles right now, so we're about half that number right now, a little less than that. But just don't hold off too long if you're hoping to join us with that trip. And remember, for more information, amateurtraveler.com/trips. I got some feedback on the trip that we did recently from India, some of it from people from India, and that always makes me just a little nervous. I heard from Sivaram Prasad, who just said, "I like the podcast, good coverage." And then I heard from Saif, who said, my name is Saif, and I'm an avid listener of the Amateur Traveler. Being from India, I quite enjoyed the most recent episode from your trip last year. Given that I'm away from the country on a short work assignment, made listening to the episode even special, having visited 3 out of the 5 places you covered. Most of the guests were right about the chaos, but I guess the cacophony adds to the uniqueness of the place. Guess you guys felt a bit empty on your first day back from home. Anyway, great listening to the episode, and hope you guys enjoyed the trip as much. Come back soon. And we did. And again, I think all of us wanted to go back, although I think explore some other regions of India. I got some feedback from Patrick about the episode we did quite a while ago on Milwaukee, saying, "I like all your episodes. I love this episode. Most episodes make me think it would be nice to visit this place." I don't want to visit Milwaukee. I need to visit Milwaukee. Barbara is the best cheerleader for a destination that I've ever heard. Please let her know that she has converted me, and I'm already planning a trip to the city. I'm going to eat so many pretzels, which I just love that feedback. Thank you, Patrick. So, funny enough, I sent that off to Barbara Alley, who was our guest on that particular show, and she said, "Thanks so much for sharing. Always nice to hear people want to come here. I'm still enjoying your podcast on my walks. I use the Oman podcast to help plan our trip over the holidays and found it as wonderful as was reported. Then, since we loved Lombok, I was thrilled to relive it through your recent podcast. Keep up the good work. Hope to see you again in the future." So it's some sort of podcast paid forward program as far as I can tell. And think about the fact that maybe you should be on Amateur Traveler and that people could be talking about your travels. Just let me know. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. And if you want the next ones, we've got some interesting episodes coming. Don't forget to subscribe to Amateur Traveler on Apple Podcasts or wherever fine podcasts or give it away for free. Join us in the Facebook community, facebook.com/Amateur Traveler. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral.